Okay, so this has been a really good two books. The first one is Linda Lael Miller, which was part of the bargain. And that's the one where the cowboy was kind of looking down on the other girl. And yet he was kind of a ranch hand that would always fight with her. But yet, when she went away to New York and married this other man, and that marriage failed, and she had a stepson, and that man didn't even treat his own son like it was his son. It was horrible. And his son, that stepson, passed away, so she comes back home after the divorce from that failed marriage, only to find out that the person she leaned on, which was a good friend to her, her brother-in-law, had been telling stories about her, saying, hey, you know what, we're having this affair, I'm going to leave my wife, which happened to be her cousin, and I'm going to be with her, and that's the way it's going to be. Well, this guy that was giving her a hard time was the brother to the brother-in-law. Now keep up with me, because it does get kind of tangled and wild and all over the place. And so therefore, with all of these lines tangled up like they are, of miscommunication, then it creates more problems, more issues, right? So the more tangled the webs the spider weaves. So let me read the back to you of what the book is about, and then if there's any points of light that I can remember that I find great to share with you, because it's a very intimate book as well, then I will share them. No place like home. After searing tragedy, Libby Kincaid just wants to go home. But the Circle Bar B Ranch isn't the haven she expects it to be. Malicious rumors about Libby are circulating through the ranch. And worse, her lifelong opponent, rancher Jess Barlow, believes them. The cowboy is very sexy and rugged as ever, but now he's promised to keep a very close eye on her. The more time Jess spends with Libby, the harder it is to resist her. He can't get her out of his mind, but his doubts linger. Are the rumors true? Is he the man she really wants? And in the end, can a proud cowboy like Jess love a woman he can't completely trust? I like what the New York Times best-selling Debbie author says about it. Linda Lael Miller creates vibrant characters in the stories I defy you to forget. What I liked about this book is she's having to overcome so many obstacles, so many times, because Kathy, which is her cousin, is deaf. And there's an issue there too. Kathy is kind of like thrown in the towel because Stacy, the husband, which is the one that wants to be with Libby, wants a child. But yet, the one who's deaf, Kathy, sees so many obstacles and feels like she couldn't be a good mother. And Kathy, the cousin to, not Libby, the cousin to Kathy, basically tells her that sounds like an excuse. It sounds like you're trying to find a way out. And that's why Stacy, her husband, is not focusing on her, because she's looking for a way out rather than a solution to having a child, which is what they both wanted. And yes, Stacy knew she was deaf going into the marriage, and he knew that he loved her. So the one that was giving her all this problems and creating such distance and such issues was Kathy herself. So, and Libby gets sick and tired of the poor pity Kathy story. And she basically, they have words so they can work it out, and then makes her see, hey, if you show more attention and be honest and forthright with what you want and your fears and your insecurities, then maybe you can have a future, but you can't if you bottle it up. And it works out well for Kathy and Stacy, because they end up working out their problems and having a baby. Meanwhile, Jess and Libby, well, they have had this. He's the ranch hand at her father's ranch, kind of like Beth and Rip, right? And here we have that pull of yin and yang. And Libby is trying to be a strong, independent woman and be like, okay, you know what? I can do things on my own, But then you have Jess, who's, the sexy as all get out cowboy. And what I liked about his situation is he although he holds her to the fire where Stacy's concerned, they both have this attraction, where Libby and Jess, every time they're around each other, they're fighting all the time. And he's like going, well, we shouldn't be fighting all the time. We should be getting along. And eventually, they realize that they've had this long attraction and they have to overcome that. And they do. I mean, it's a good part. There's a part here, though, where she thinks she's not good enough. And I did have that marked on page 98, 99. She's explaining that he was with other women, supplied Jess quietly, gently. Libby nodded, managed to look up at him. And you stayed with him. He was settling the mug down, drawing her near. Finally, he crouched before her on his haunches and took the cup from her hands and set it aside. You couldn't leave Jonathan, Libby. I understand that. That's the stepson. Besides, why should the fact that you stuck with the marriage have any bearing on the attitude towards you? I just thought, what? Prodded Jess when her sentence fell away. What did you think, Libby? Tears clogged her throat. I thought that I couldn't be very desirable if my own husband could and would not. Jess gave a ragged sigh. My goodness, Libby, don't you think that Aaron was unfaithful because of some lack in you? That was exactly what she thought on a subliminal level. Another woman, stronger and more experienced, more alluring, might have been able to keep her husband happy, make him want her. Jess's hands came to Libby's shoulder, gently insisted, Lib, talk to me. Just how terrific could I be? She erupted suddenly in an anguish that would have been hidden no longer. Just how desirable. My husband needed other women because he couldn't bring himself to be with me. Jess drew her close and held her sobs as restraint at last broke free. That wasn't your fault, Libby. He breathed. His hand was in her hair now, soothing in her and strong. Oh, honey, that was not your fault at all. Of course it was, she wailed. The soft green knit sweater was hard in strength, the shoulder beneath. If I'd been better, if I'd known how to. Don't do this to yourself. Shh, baby. Once freed, Libby's emotions seemed impossible to check, and they ran down a deep wild river, swirling into senseless currents and eddies that was causing her pride to founder. And I love this next part. Listen to what Jess says to her. Jess caught her trembling hands in his, squeezed them reassuringly. Listen to me, Princess, he said. Those doubts that you have about yourself are understandable. Under those circumstances, but they're not valid. You are desirable. He paused and searched her face with tender, reproving eyes. I can swear to that. Libby still felt broken, and she hadn't forgotten the terrible things that Aaron had said to her during that marriage. That she was cold and unresponsive, that he hadn't been impotent before he married her. Time and time again he had held up for Jonathan as proof that he'd been virile with his first wife, taken cruel pleasure in pointing that out, when none of his other girlfriends found him wanting. And retching herself back to the less traumatic present, Libby blurted out, Be with me then, Jess. Let me prove it to myself. No, he said coldly and finally flat, and then he released her hand, stood up, and turned away as if in disgust. But they do work things out. There's like a baby race at the end of the book. And it's just an amazing roller coaster ride that I want you to read. Part of the bargain. And it gets a 20 from me. So that tells you how good it is. The second book, A Wife for Westmoreland, by the New York best time-selling Brenda Jackson, where Derringer Westmoreland is haunted by memories of a woman whose face he cannot recall. When he finally traces the mystery woman, Lucia Conyers, she's less than impressed by his charms. For the first time in his life, he wants to win a woman's heart that he has to risk his own. And there is a section in that book that I think all of us women can relate to, where we think, okay, we don't have any plans. That's okay. Even though we had an amazing first date, we're not going to have a second date. And she's sitting there and she's watching the Lifetime movie and she's on the phone. And she then thinks, oh, the next door neighbor's coming over to bring cookies or something. And lo and behold, it's Derringer at the front door. And he's like going, well, we need to have that next date. And she's just like, can't believe that it's him. I'm kind of rearranging the words a little bit. But it's a great point in that book. And it's very passionate, very romantic. A Wife for Westmoreland. And she starts off with a Bible phrase. Let me get to that Bible phrase at the start of that book, because it's 2 books in ones. Better a meal of vegetables where there is love than a fattened calf with hatred. Proverbs 15:1. And also it says, to Gerald Jackson Sr., my one and only, to all my readers who are joining me on this Madras Westmoreland cruise to 2011 this month, thanks for making this special, and this book is especially for you. To my Heavenly Father, how great thou art. And it was just an amazing book, because she's always had a crush on this man, but yet he's a ladies' man. And all these women usually fall at his feet. And at one point, there's this one woman that comes to her and says, I hope you know that you're not going to end up married to him, because I'm the one that's going to be his wife. So she kind of distanced herself, and she's like, what's the use in trying? He's already got somebody else on the hook. I'm just somebody that he would have on the side, and no thank you. And I can't say I would blame her. So while she's distancing herself, there's a good family member that gets involved. And she's like going, well, I think that you two should talk it out. And she's like, no, 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 no. Well, there's this Westmoreland ball that they throw every year. And she was going to go with her parents just like she first did when they first met. Which that's when her daddy warned him away from her. So they've kind of had this going for a while, this attraction that is. But they just haven't acted on it, right? So anyway, she goes to the Westmoreland ball. And he does the above and beyond romantic thing. While they're dancing, he interrupts the dance. And he's like, asking her, does it bother you that we're dancing or something to that effect? I wish I had marked that page and I didn't. Anyway, she's like going, well, this is over. We're done. You've already made your decision. You're with this other woman. Because not only had that woman come to her, that woman's friends had come to her and let her know, hey, you've lost your chance. He's going to be with her. That's going to be his wife. So just forget it. And he grabs the microphone at this ball. And she's not one for much PDAs, okay? So she's kind of shy away. And he's like, but you're the only woman for me, and you're the woman that I'm going to marry. And it's just like, oh my gosh, how can she not love this man? And of course, she says yes. So it's an amazing book as well. And it gets a 20. So Part of the Bargain and A Wife for Westmoreland gets a 20. And this amazing book, I'm going to put it in the bag to go to the Candy Kitchen. But just know, Brenda Jackson has now made one of my favorite best readers that I'm going to have to read and watch for her stories as well as Linda Lael Miller. Both stories were off the charts, grand, and you've got to check out this amazing book. Thank you for sharing that moment with me.